Welcome back to another Emma Tries video. And in this one, we are trying Adobe Captivate. And I think this is one of the ones that a lot of people are going to want to see. Captivate, I think, is probably the only competitor, I suppose, to Storyline. So I've wanted to try it for a while. And I think I downloaded a free trial years ago now, but then the organization that I was working with was using Articulate. So we just carried on sort of down that route. So I think it's come on leaps and bounds since the last time I had a look at this. So first thing to note, we'll just kind of cover what Captivate is and the price point and everything. It isn't included in a Creative Cloud license. So if you are an Adobe user, you have to buy this or subscribe to this outside of your Creative Cloud license. And it's not too bad, £33 a month. I like that you can pay it monthly as well. Isn't astronomically expensive if you look at things like Articulate. So if you did want to go down this as your main authoring tool, then that's actually quite affordable, really. So I got the vibe from this and from just having a look at it that it's very much kind of like a hybrid tool. And what I mean by that is it's sort of like a mix between a slide-based authoring tool, such as iSpring or Storyline, and a continuous scroll authoring tool, such as kind of Rise or Chameleon or Quantic and things like that. It is responsive as well, which is why I think, again, it's that kind of hybrid tool that you could have it as a very traditional looking e-learning, but it does respond to different devices. So it's really intriguing. And I think we've kind of been asking for a tool like this for a while. I mean, I've been saying that I'd love a tool that's kind of in the middle of Rise and Storyline. So it'd be interesting to see the level of functionality we get with this and how easy it is to customize it and design with it. Now, I haven't had a chance to create my own course, so I'm going to take you through just one of the templates that they have, and then we'll go into a blank course and have a look at kind of some of the functionality and everything. So here we are in a template course, and the first thing that I noticed about this was that it kind of works in a column structure. So you don't have the freedom to kind of drag things around as you please. So I can reorder things. For example, I can drag, if I had like another interactive element, let's maybe jump to a different slide. Here we go. So I could swap these two over or pull this above here like that. But I don't have the freedom to, for example, move this header wherever I want or move these bullet points wherever I want. They come as kind of like one interactive block, I suppose. And I guess I don't necessarily think this is a downside. I think they've done it like this to ensure this responsiveness. I mean, we all know sort of more fluid softwares such as Storyline, where you can literally move everything everywhere, isn't responsive. So I am assuming that they've had to do it this way to ensure that kind of responsive nature across slides. So I think for people like me that love being able to put things anywhere, it can feel a little bit restrictive in terms of what you can put on your slide and where you can put it. And I did find this kind of having to drag these things sort of and jump them around the slide a little bit annoying. But I think it's something you'd get used to if this was the right tool for you. I'll also note we have this kind of scroll feature. So you can see as I've pulled that text box down, we get this kind of dotted line with these little arrows. And essentially that is telling us where this screen will end. So this is for desktop, and this is sized so that it would fill a desktop screen. But this little bit under here would create a scroll bar. So the learner or the user would have to scroll down. And you'll see the same on tablet and mobile view as well. So if I dragged this kind of further down, you'd get the same dotted line, and the same with mobile. So you can see it here that the learner would have to have scrolled down to see this bit. So this is where we start to see that hybrid of a slide-based e-learning and a continuous scroll. And I quite like this because it means that you can vary your pages. So if you had a specific activity, for example, you could have that as a scrolling page, but then your next slide could just be like this and be normal. So yeah, I quite like that. It gives a little bit more flexibility in terms of being able to put more on a slide particularly if you've got, for example, like a scenario activity, or if you wanted text up here, but then like a reflective activity down there. So they give you a few design options as well, a little bit like the PowerPoint designer tool. They give you kind of a few suggestions, so you can select these and it will reposition your slide for you. So if you're somebody that maybe struggles with laying out your slides, this could be helpful as well. And you can change things like your slide background too. I just kind of make a note that any changes you make to imagery will be applied across devices as well. So you don't design for specific devices. You can't make changes on mobile view and then it will allow you to make different changes on desktop. It will carry that all the way over, which is pretty common with any kind of responsive tool. I like this feature as well. So if you double click on an image, you can make changes and it will live preview and you can see how it looks across devices as well. So if I change this to example stretch, you can see that it changes on the preview too. And from here, you can also decide whether you want it to be scaled, so it will change size per device, or fixed height, so it would stay the same size, but you obviously run the risk that it could be cut off by doing that. So that's a nice feature too. We'll go into kind of all the customization options and the functionality on a blank slide deck. But I think first impressions, I do like the UI. It is clear, and I was quite not concerned, I suppose, but I did think this was going to be one of my longest videos because Adobe is known for overcomplicating things. Anybody that's used like Photoshop and Illustrator will know that Adobe love their functionality, and those programs can be an absolute minefield to even just do the basic things. So I was expecting very similar from this, that we'd have like tons and tons of functions down here and millions of customization options and whatever. So I'm actually quite surprised by that. As you can see, we've got a few sort of different options for our blocks, and I like that it gives you this little kind of call out when you hover over, so you know what you're kind of clicking on. But I think the icons are quite clear anyway, so it's fairly easy to navigate. You also get this timeline feature, so again, very similar to tools like Storyline, where you can obviously change like the animations and things and when things are coming in. If you've got audio here, you'd be able to sort of adjust the audio and everything. So this is where you start to get that elevated level of functionality that you don't usually get with things like continuous scroll, authoring tool. So you do have some flexibility with this. You could literally design it with one slide and have it just scroll down if you wanted. You don't necessarily need to have multiple pages. Or you could go for this very traditional slide based look. And I will kind of say this is giving me PowerPoint vibes a little bit. It does look, I mean, no offense to the person that sort of created this template, but it does look a little bit like a glorified PowerPoint. So I probably wouldn't use this particular software for this or design it in this way. And I think this is when you kind of start to see some of the downsides of working with that column or that block by block sort of structure, because you can run the risk that it just starts to look like a sort of pretty PowerPoint. But I don't know, we'll have a play around and see what we can do. So let's jump into the blank one and we'll start to like explore the functionality and the customization options. So here is our blank slide. And when you first create a new project, you'll be brought, sort of, this is what you'll see. It will be just a blank slide. And I like this. It's nice and clear. It feels that I can kind of see everything. There's not tons of settings down here to kind of feel overwhelming. It's a good place to start. I like having a blank canvas. So before we go into kind of functionality, I'll just talk you through the theming options. So if we go to project properties down here, you can see we get a few options in terms of the way the project looks. So we've got content display, so fixed or proportional. So fixed essentially is that it would stay the same size across devices, so it won't be responsive, or proportional, which is it will resize itself. And it's set to 80%, which I'm not entirely sure why, because obviously 100% kind of looks better because it fills the screen. And you can also obviously change your dimensions. So I would probably change that to the 1920 by 1080 pixels. You can also change your theme here. So if you are working with branding color palettes, you get a really good range of customization options with this. I think it's a really nice balance between not giving you too much that it feels like a real task to get this set up, but enough that you can make this branded and you can make it your own. So it does also live update, I believe. So let's just change this color here to that dark. So there you go, you can see it live updates as well, so you can see how it's going to look and you don't have to keep going in and out of that. Let's put that back to white because that is horrible. There we go. You can also change your font as well. So you can change your font per heading and body text, which is nice. So if you've got branding that has different heading fonts to body text font, you can set that up as well. And obviously all the way down to like subheadings and variables and details and questions and everything. You can literally completely customize this. And you don't have to do this. You can still change the font and the text whilst you're working within a slide. But sometimes it's worth spending that half an hour just getting this set up because it does save you time when you are creating slides if this is all preset in. And you can change things like the sort of letter spacing, the font, whether it's bold, italic, all of that kind of stuff. You can also set an image preset. So if you want all your images in black and white, for example, you could decide to do that. And your background too. So if you want a solid feel, or if you're having an image or a gradient or a pattern or whatever else, you can get that applied to all slides. And your UI components, so we've got buttons where you can change all the states. I really like this. This is really handy. I wish Articulate had a function like this where you could set your button states for all the buttons that you put in. That would be really useful. And again, you can change like the button colors per state and the font and everything. And the same with things like checkboxes and kind of those question functions too. So this again is where we start to see that elevated functionality above that continuous scroll authoring tool, because you don't usually get options to change things like button states and that when you're working on a program that is more restrictive, like those kind of continuous scroll tools. So yeah, this is good. I like this. It's a good start. We've also got a play bar, and this essentially acts like the player. So if I click this one here, it says TOC or talk and play bar. And this is your sort of play button, your accessibility functions, that kind of thing. So if I clicked show talk, this is our menu. And you would have, if I had like multiple slides, you'd have all the slides here and you can reorder them and group them and all that kind of thing. Or you can just turn it off. And play bar, which is our back next functions, our play button, closed captions, that kind of thing. You can also show and hide it. And you can also turn this on and off with variables during the course as well. So I'm just going to turn it off for now. Again, this is really easy to do. I like that it live previews as well. The sort of functions are really easy to understand. This is nice and simple. Okay, so let's actually start building stuff and putting things together. So you can add a new slide by clicking the plus button, and you can choose from a range of kind of pre-designed slides or sort of pre-structured slides, I suppose, such as question ones, or we've got like text and image, the kind of basic things, or you can just go for blank like I've done here. You can also add in your own blocks. So we've got text blocks, which is, again, really simple. We've got paragraph, multi-column and list. And to add it, you literally just click and it will put it in. And I really like the fact that you get almost like an illustrated version of what it looks like as well. This is just a nice feature for people like me who are very visual. You kind of see what you're getting, I suppose, with this. We've got media blocks, so image and text, image grids, characters, and there is a really good asset library, which I'll go through in a minute, where you can swap these characters in and out if you're doing scenario-based learning. We've got SVGs, which essentially is like icons and text, and videos as well. And our interactive components, so we've got things like buttons, input field, which is like your text entry, drop down, radio. So this is kind of if you're creating or wanted to create maybe a custom multiple choice, or you wanted to use this maybe as a survey question instead, you could make use of these kind of checkboxes and radio buttons. Branding blocks. So what this does is essentially allows you to add your branding to the top of each page. So you can add like a logo in here, you could put the name of the course. This is where the slide number will be displayed, but you could probably swap this variable out for anything else. So instead, if you wanted it to have like the date on it, for example, or if you wanted it to say something like hello and the learner's name, you could have that. So there's quite a few possibilities with that. But this is quite nice if you're doing doing this for a client and they wanted their branding on the slide. This would allow it to be in the same place every time. So that's quite a nice feature. And we've got widgets as well, which are kind of like click to reveal type things. We've got tabs, cards, your carousels. We've also got a certificate function, which is good. This is always a bonus when you've got a pre-built certificate. Not everybody loves them, but they are a pain to program in, particularly if you're using like Storyline, for example. You've got to gather the variables, and sometimes you need JavaScript and all that kind of stuff. So if you're not a person that is very familiar with coding or variables, having this done for you is handy. And as you can see, where we've got those dollar signs is where it's indicating that it's pulling a variable through. So with this one, again, you can customize it as well to suit your needs. So you could change the look and feel using these design options. You can also turn off components. So if I wanted to get rid of the signature and everything, I could. And you can change out this image as well and make it kind of more your own. You can put your company logo up here and everything. So you get a good range of like customization options with that. So as you can see, as I've done that, it started to create this scroll page as well, because I've put things below the slide space. So as I was kind of saying before, it can feel a little bit restrictive when you start doing this, because you can only sort of drag things around like that. So I can edit this text and everything, but I couldn't then, for example, grab, say, one of the widgets and put an accordion next to it here. This title will take up the whole space. And you can change the alignment and spacing. So for example, I could make this more like that, but you still can't put something next to it. So this title block is taking up that whole width. And if I try to then grab like a media block to go next to it, like an image grid, if I click on that, there we go, you can see it just jumps it down even further. So this is where you start to feel those restrictions a little bit, and it can get a little bit frustrating because you just want to be able to kind of maybe drag an image here or something. So again, this really is dependent on what kind of background you're from and how comfortable you feel with slide design. I do think you just have to be careful that you don't get, it doesn't become kind of this very, like I said, very PowerPointy type course where you're just putting in like text block, image, and whatever. But on the flip side, it can also be useful in that you don't overcrowd your slides. So although you do have this continuous scroll feature, and as I said, you could have everything on one page, you could also, it does also kind of encourage you to not overcrowd things, because these blocks tend to fill up most of the space. So if I put on like a video, for example, you can see it fills up a good amount of the space, and you can actually resize the blocks as well by just dragging it down. So as you can see, I can make it as big or as little as I like, and I believe you can align it as well. So I could align it sort of left or right too. And I can also add on things like a title, body text as well, and change the sort of the background and all that usual stuff. So I do think I get it. I get why they've had to do it this way, because if I then switch over to tablet and then to mobile, you can see that it allows for that kind of responsiveness in that resizing of these elements. So I totally get why they've had to kind of do it in this, what feels like a slightly more restrictive way. I think it would be, you'd have to define from the outset how you want to use this, whether you are going to use it as that slide-based e-learning with that kind of next and sort of linear horizontal approach, or whether you wanted it to perform more like this with this continuous scroll. I think it'd be tricky to find a balance between the two, perhaps, or it could feel a little bit kind of mismatched if you had maybe one slide that looked like this, and then you had like a slide that was just kind of blank like that. Like I think it could feel a bit confusing and a bit weird to the learner. And do you know what? I actually kind of prefer this format. I haven't actually tested how many kind of blocks you can put down. Let's just have a go and see how many it'll let me kind of put in before it might say you can't go any further than that. Let's go for quotes as well. Okay, so it does let you add sort of a substantial amount of things. Let's go for that. And yeah, cool. Okay, so it does go down quite far. So you could, yeah, I think in theory, kind of create a course literally on a single page. And then you can sort of like edit all of these things as well, change the text, you could even put buttons in so that things don't reveal until someone's clicked the button, for example. So on that note, let's have a look at some of the like variables and state options that you get as well. So let's just explore some of the more advanced features, I guess, that you get with Captivate. So I've put a button on the slide here, and you have something called interactions, and this is essentially like your trigger. So it says here when click and tap. So when the user clicks the button, you can then add an action. So we've got our basic ones here, like going to the next slide or going to a specific slide, showing and hiding things, applying an animation. So you might want it to do an emphasis animation when the learner clicks it, toggling the view. And then we've got a big list here where you can choose from things like showing the menu and hiding the menu, adjusting the timeline, and more advanced features such as running JavaScript and adjusting variables and everything. So you get a real good selection of things that you can do with this. We've also got a few animations too. So you've got your entrance, exit, and emphasis animations. I like this jello one. These are quite cool. So you can play around with these as well, in the direction and kind of the delay and everything as well. And you can test it to see how it looks. To see your variables, you need to click the project properties button in the bottom right of your screen. And you can see variables appears at the very bottom under the theming options. And you can add a new variable. So if you want something specific, if you're doing like custom completion, or if you want a variable for changing states or whatever, then you can add that. And if you click the cog, it will show you the variables that you have available to you. So we've got things like your LMS course name and learner name. So you could add these in if you wanted to pull that across. So for example, like in that certificate, we've also got system ones. So your date, your kind of the year, we've got closed captions, we've got loads of things related to the quizzes and the question counts and everything as well. To create any variable, you literally just click the plus button, and then you can choose whether it's a number, true or false, or string, and then you can obviously give it a name and a value, for example, if you're doing number, and the same with true or false as well. And then you just click create, and then that becomes available for you to use as well. And you can select it to either duplicate it or delete it too. So if we head back to our button here, you can see that we've got our design options, and this is where we can see our states as well. Now, if you had done the theme, then these states would match what you've essentially preset in that theme. But here you can also change them as well. So if you wanted a different color button on this slide because the background was a slightly different color, for example, you can go in and customize that as you wish. And as you can see, you just select each state and then you can make those changes as well. So how do you add a variable? So using the variables is really simple. If I just type in some test text here, and then if you put in your $signs, $2 together, it brings up a list of variables. So you don't have to memorize any sort of variable names or codes or anything. And from here, you can just choose which one you want to be in the text. So for example, I might go LMS learner name, just double click on it. And then when I preview this, it probably wouldn't come up on preview because obviously it wouldn't be inputted in the LMS. But if I had something else like the date, for example, when I preview, it would say test and the date. So it's really easy to add in variables like that. And again, you could just change that out by deleting it, keeping up those $signs, and then choosing from the list. And you'll see your custom ones here as well. So you can see I've got test, and you can choose from a big range of different variables that you can add in. So to apply a variable to a specific action as opposed to a text variable, it works very similar to Storyline if you are familiar with that. So we'll use our button again as an example. And you can see that I've set up a interaction here so that when the learner clicks on the button, it will go to the slide blank 2 if the variable that I created, this test variable, is equal to true. So we'll just walk through that quickly again. So if you click add new action, trigger is click tap, and let's choose the action. I don't know, hide the button. Obviously this would make more sense if I had more things on screen. And then the variable bit is here. So we've got, this is part of a condition. So if, and then you can choose your variable from your list. So we've got test here, but I could choose one of the system ones here. So like the slide count, for example, if that is equal to, I don't know, let's just put in 12. And there we go. And then you can also choose an animation as well, which is quite nice. If, for example, you wanted a button to emphasize when the learner gets a question right, if you wanted the button to pulse to show that they need to go next, you could do something like that. So it's really, really simple. It works very, very similar to Storyline in that sense. And you can add as many interactions as you want to a specific button or function or whatever. Just be careful that you don't overlap things and end up cancelling things out. So having that as an option as well is a big bonus with this sort of hybrid authoring tool. It allows you to create that elevated level of interactivity and be able to have that little bit more control over how your learners progress through your course. So before we wrap this up, let's have a look at the sort of asset library and the kind of accessibility functions that you get as well. So it does have a really good asset library. You can choose from slide templates to get you started. So if you're very new to e-learning design, or you struggle with that kind of visual design aspect and laying your slides out, you could start with this. And I get that this may not just be an e-learning tool. You probably could use this for other things as well. But I would say, like I kind of highlighted at the beginning, these templates are giving PowerPoint. They are exactly what you would think of if you pictured a traditional e-learning. They just look really boring. And again, no hate or offense to the person that mocked these up for Adobe, but it just, oh, I don't know, it just looks very, very typical e-learning, which is what kind of scares me a little bit with this this program. There is actually some more decent ones here, which are a little bit more illustrated and maybe a bit more visually kind of impactful. So I would just say be careful if you do use these templates. Make sure that your slides potentially aren't looking a little bit too text heavy, because some of these are very text heavy. Okay, so we've got a good range of those. Now let's have a look at what else we get. Let's just collapse that. So you can search for specific things. So if you wanted, say, a icon of a cake, you could type cake and it would show you that, sort of filter it down. We get characters, and you get a real kind of big library of characters. And if you select one of these, you get them in different poses as well. I think this one here has something like 42 different poses. So if you are going down that scenario-based e-learning, then you've got a really good bank of resources to get you started, especially with characters, because they can be really tricky to source on stock sites unless you've got specific licenses and things. We've also got images, so your kind of stock library. Icons, again, a really nice selection. Obviously, there's way more than just these ones on screen here. And audio. And this is quite a good feature, because you don't often see an audio resource library with authoring tools. You tend to get like the images and the icons and stuff, but you don't often get audio. So this is quite good and could allow you to just add that little extra level of media, I suppose, to your builds. You could add like jingles when people click on buttons, or if you're doing a scenario, there might be something for example, some background noise if you're doing a scenario where somebody stood in a shop, for example. So this is a nice touch as well. And this resource library is really well stocked. So if you are new to visual design, this could prevent you from having to go to external sites to be able to gather sort of images and icons and everything. You've got a lot to work with already. We've also got the screen capture function, which I didn't go through before, where you can record software simulations. I think a lot of people would find that very useful, particularly kind of government-based organisations and tech-based organisations. And we've got accessibility functions. So obviously this is great that you can add in accessibility text. You can also hide things from your screen reader. You can change the tab order as well. So this essentially is like the focus order. And you can just drag things up and down. And this is the kind of reading order if a screen reader would read it in, and if you keyboard tab as well. And I think that is pretty much everything to go through with Captivate. So let's just close this image library. And obviously to preview, there's a massive preview button here. It's not rocket science. You just click on that. And as I kind of mentioned at the beginning of the video, I think the UI on this is very clear and I like it. It makes it very easy to see where all the functions are and the buttons and everything you need to click on. So an interesting thing to note with this is that when you preview, it previews your course in a browser window. So this is my first slide. And as you can see, where I've added all the components, it creates this scroll bar. And then if I jumped over to, say, this slide, obviously, if I just click the menu, you can see that scroll bar goes because this is not going down past that dotted line or past that one window page. So this is useful in being able to check sort of how far the learner, I suppose, is having to scroll down to view your content if you are going to go for those pages where you've got that kind of continuous scroll content as well. And you can view across devices with this too. Finally, let's have a very quick look at the publish settings. So you get a few different settings for publishing, and you can publish to your computer, the Adobe Learning Manager, which I think is kind of like their LMS, generate device preview, and I really like this feature. So what you do essentially is scan that QR code, and that's specific to your course, or you can copy that link. And it gives you a preview of your course on whatever device it is that you've scanned the code. So if it's a tablet or a mobile, and you can see the course exactly as you would or somebody would when you've published it. And this is such a nice feature because that's something that is a bit of a pet hate of mine with other authoring tools, is that if you're creating something specifically for mobile, it can be a bit tricky to preview it on a mobile, because quite often I find that this mobile preview isn't actually true to what it looks like on a real device, and you have to go back and forth and do different changes and everything to get it to look okay. So being able to very quickly scan that QR code and then just see what it looks like is just really handy, without having to send links over to your email accounts to preview on your mobile and everything. So I really like that. That's a really, really good feature. So when you click publish to computer, this is what you get. And at first I was a little bit confused because it just says HTML. And my first thought was, oh, you can't publish it to SCORM. It's just a web-based platform. But actually, if you click the reporting button, this is where you set all of your completion criteria if you've got a sort of final assessment or whatever. And this is where you can choose your SCORM and sort of API options and whatever. If you click configure, you can go right down into the other settings, such as if you want it 3rd or 4th edition, your identifiers, version, all of that kind of stuff as well. So you could get real into the detail if you needed to. And you can change like your quizzing and everything. So if the user can skip the quiz, they must take it, showing scores. So you've got a real good range of settings that you can change to get it to work exactly as you like it to. You can also just set completion criteria that that is just based on the slide views as opposed to quiz, which obviously is what it's set as at the moment because I don't actually have quiz in this. So you could just turn that off as well. And you can change general project settings too. So if you wanted like an author name on there and sort of company details or contact details as well. And yeah, so that was a little bit confusing, I suppose, is that it's not inherently obvious that you can publish to Scorn, but you can. And when you do, it essentially, you set all that up and then you click publish and it just provides you with the zip folder, and that's what you then upload to your LMS. And that is the end of our walkthrough of Adobe Captivate. And I'll be honest, I thought this video would be longer. I thought this was going to be one of my biggest, longest videos, because as I said at the beginning, Adobe does have that reputation of overcomplicating things. So I was really expecting to have reams of functionality and customization options to take you through. So I was actually surprised that the program itself is quite simple, and surprised in a good way. I think for Adobe, they've really simplified this down, and it is fairly user friendly. Like I said, it can feel a little bit restrictive for people that like the freedom of being able to drag things around. But I think for quick creation of slides, they've tried to make it as user friendly as possible. But anyway, at the end of each of these videos, I am scoring these authoring tools on 4 categories, and that is ease of use, functionality, customization, and skill level. So let's now get into that. Okay, so starting off with ease of use, and I think I'll put this at 3.5. It's fairly easy to create a new project, to add in slides, to add your elements to the screen, but moving things around and kind of resizing them to look good on different devices isn't the smoothest process, I suppose, in the world, because you've got that restrictions of that column-based functionality. That moving things around by dragging could become just a bit annoying, to be honest, especially if you are going for that continuous scroll. If you've got something that's halfway down the page and you suddenly want it up the top, then you would have to drag it all the way up. So I think in that instance, I would put it down. Also, I found, I don't know, this might have just been my computer, but I found sometimes editing the text not so user friendly, trying to click on it to get the functions up to type in new text was a bit buggy. And I just think it is that restriction of that moving stuff around, I think, which lets this down a little bit. But like I said, I can totally see why they've had to do it because of maintaining that responsive nature. But, not being able to put text box next to a button, for example, in a column structure, I think what would have made it better is if you could choose the column structure of your page. So for example, maybe one page you might have a 3-column structure, and then that's how your elements would appear, so that you could have just a little bit more variation with the layouts. I think the column structure of it is what contributes it to it feeling a little bit PowerPointy still. So following on from that, we've got functionality, and I think you get a good range of functionality actually. I probably set it up at a 4. And that is because you get those options for variables and states, and that is what elevates it above those kind of traditional continuous scroll courses. And I love the fact that it is this kind of hybrid function as well, that you can have it as either, and you don't necessarily need 2 separate authoring tools. You could either have something that's a mix of both, or you could just have a continuous scroll style and use 1 page or 2 pages. So I think that is what sort of elevates it up in terms of functionality. You also do get a really nice range and useful range of blocks to start with. So they give you enough that you don't have to do too much of the work yourself. But obviously you've got the option to go with blank slides and build things yourself. So yeah, in terms of functionality, I think they give you a good starting point, and obviously you can't fault the asset library either. Customization, this is really tricky because you get good customization in terms of being able to change button states, animations, the theming I think is really good, but kind of what I covered with ease of use, it's that column structure which is letting it down in terms of customizing your slides, which is why I think I'm going to have to sit it at a 3.5, which is a shame because actually in terms of customizing the elements or the blocks, in terms of the coloring, your backgrounds, the animations and variables and states and everything, you get really good customization options actually. And as I covered, that resource library, being able to add in the icons and images and characters, they give you a lot to get started with and to be able to make this for your own. I really like that branding header where you can add the logo in. So yeah, it is that just not being able to move things around the slide, which I think lets it down. If you could have the freedom to move things a little bit more freely, I'm not necessarily saying being able to place things wherever you like, but be able to move things a little bit more freely or decide on the structure of your slide, that would definitely push it up a little bit more. Maybe more on par with things like website builders like Squarespace, if anybody's familiar with that, in that things are restricted to a kind of like a bounding box, but you can move them around so that you can still maintain that responsive nature. So yeah, sadly, I'm going to have to sit it at 3.5. And finally, skill level. And this is tricky as well. I think it is beginner friendly in the sense that you could quite easily use one of their template slides or use their design feature to very, very quickly mock up an e-learning. But whether that would actually look good is kind of another discussion, I suppose. I'd say it sits in between beginner and intermediate. I'm going to set it at beginner because I think a beginner could use this quite easily, like actually physically using the tool. Then it doesn't take sort of a long time to pick up how to actually put things on the slides and publish a course and all that kind of stuff. I mean, I didn't actually create a course in this, and I figured that out within about half an hour of kind of playing with it. I'd say if you want to create something that actually looks decent and doesn't look like a glorified PowerPoint, then you need that sort of intermediate level really to be able to use things like states and variables and actually make this perform to that elevated level over PowerPoint. Because that would be my only criticism of this really. I do like it. I think it's a good tool and it's really well priced. It just feels very PowerPoint to me. And I think that does come from that restriction in terms of being able to lay out your slides. But I don't know. That might just be my own personal bias coming through. So do let me know if you try this. I'm just on a free trial, so there's no functionality restrictions either in terms of if you download the free trial, you get access to all the functionality. You don't have to kind of elevate your subscription or anything. There's no tiered system. So once you've subscribed to this, you get everything. So yeah, if you download a free trial or you use Captivate, I'd love to see what people are creating using Captivate and what the possibilities are. Because at the moment, I just can't move past the fact that it looks a bit PowerPointy. So yeah, if you do create a proper course within this, please share it with me. I'd love to see what other learning designers are doing. And that is the end of this video. So I will catch you in the next one.